Good morning, everybody. It is Velva Dawn here with Wisdom Weaver, take two. So we are doing an interview here with Ross Edey, and we were just having some technical difficulties, but we are going to get this figured out. And he is going to be joining us here because he has a lot of wisdom, even though he's saying he doesn't right now with trying to get on this Facebook Live. Sometimes it's tricky, right? If you've never done it. Okay, so here. Okay, so we're just, bringing on the links here. Approve. Okay. Okay, Ross, it says that it's adding you. There we go. We got it. We did it.
Wasn't that fun?
It is never fun for you or for me, but we did it. So good job.
We just took wisdom right out of the picture.
I'm like, oh, sometimes, yeah, this happens. So good morning.
Good morning, Dawn.
And thank you for joining me here on Wisdom Weaver Wednesday.
You're welcome, and you.
So I'm excited to have you. Thank you for taking the time to join me and for us to have this casual chat and connection about life.
No flirting.
No, there'll be no flirting on this show, right?
Oh, there was.
There was.
I'll leave it be now.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just begin. Why don't you share with everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okie dokie. Well, my name is Ross Edey. I've got 3 wonderful children and 6 better grandchildren. My connection with Dawn is through a mutual best friend, one of those unconditional friends being my daughter Fawn. I am an educator by trade, but I'm a student of life, similar to Dawn and Fawn. I've always felt a connection to my heart and followed the wind as to where it would take me. At age 16, 17, my father bought the Stampede Ranch with the idea of having it be a alternative to formal detention for troubled children. And he lobbied the government for 14 years before that became fruition. During that time, we ran a guest ranch for 5 or 6 years. I feel probably I've stated that the education I got from being with fairly influential people coming to stay at the ranch probably surpassed my years at university with regards to real learning. Graduated U of C with a phys ed degree. Was 3 of 28 that got a job the first year that year. I ended up back in hometown. I grew up in Cayley. High River and Nanton were both hometowns. We joked that Nanton would take us in sports no matter what. When we got good, High River wanted us. But I was blessed to come to Nanton. My principal was on the Palomino hockey team, which I'd played with since I was 16. So maybe it was a who you know world. I'm hoping that my presence at Palomino parties at that time was a little bit of a choice by him to have me a part of his staff. I worked in the public system for 3 years, and I mentioned that I allowed my heart to talk and I allowed myself to listen to myself. And the 3rd year, at the 1st of June, I said to my wife, Gail, I should mention that I had a wonderful partner for 50 years. I lost her in 2018. And I went to her and I said, I have to give 30 days notice, so I'm going to resign this morning. And she said, well, that's cool. What are we going to do now? And that showed the power that she came from. My dad asked me if I had shit for brains, but we'll leave that aside. So I left the public system. Probably one of the guiding reasons was I perceived that I wasn't encouraged to have the relationships that I wanted with the students. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Basically, I will say that probably if I have a gift, it's that of making relationships because people matter to me. And probably even at that age, troubled children mattered to me, and I empathized with what I will term later as their empty. So when I recognized that I wasn't going to be able to work in that system and be connected to the kids, I knew there had to be something else. I went back to the ranch. Father had 5 young 2-year-olds that needed training. So to make my summer wages, at that time, rodeo was my dream. I actually became an educator so I could have my summers off to rodeo. And I became a very average pro cowboy, but a very good teacher, I believe. So I dove into these 5 2-year-olds, and the then leader of the Eden Valley Reserve, we call them counselors, you could call them chiefs. The real chiefs are up at Morley, because Eden Valley is a stony band of the Morley band, the Bears Paw band. And the chief at that time had been a family friend. He traded with beaver with my father. Probably, I think one year they did $10,000 worth of beaver trading, which I loved to sit back and watch the two of them. Anywho, he climbed up on a rail and watched me 4 days out of the week. And on the 5th day, he came over and handed me a phone number, and he said, I want you to phone this Indian Affairs number. I want to have you come over to Eden Valley. So that began my career over at Eden Valley. The Indian Affairs agent called me in. He says, I don't know who you are, but I've been told to hire you, so let's create a job for you. So I became the supervisor of their LIP work program, their WOP program, which were government-sponsored work programs, whereby the young men would be busy cutting wood if I drove my Jimmy up over the hill, and they sat and smoked cigarettes if I wasn't. I was a recreational director. We had a active fastball team. They wanted to be in the best fastball league that was in Southern Alberta. Mm-hmm. And I accommodated that. We didn't win a lot of games, but they had a lot of fun. We had a traveling hockey team. We had 2 amateur rodeos during the summer. The challenge I had from the Indian Affairs was basically to attack the alcohol problem. It was basically find something that will have them care about life a little bit more than what they do now. So what I found out was we succeeded with that. And the people, bless their soul, allowed me to become family. I was one of few white men that had access to all their homes. In the 5th year, Indian Affairs, in their wisdom, and this happened twice during my lifetime, decided that that program had lived its fruition. They didn't have funding for it, so they asked me to go into the school to be the principal. I had already left that system, but I did go in because at this time I did recognize I had 3 children at home. Gail and I had the wisdom to have 3 children in 2 years. We're not really sure how we realized, and in retrospect, it certainly wasn't fair to Gail, but she did wonderful. And I now recognize that we could have spaced it out a little bit. We did finally recognize what was causing it. I took that year, and at that time, Father had the ranch, and he finally received the opportunity to have his first 3 children. So I can remember driving by and past him with his dress coat and his hat on, hauling these 3 characters into the Longview School. And you know, Don, well, that the Longview School is a melting pot to start with, because it has partial Native children, partial white, and the teachers scramble to deal with the inherent challenges that that brings. Mm-hmm. The boys lasted 3 weeks, and unfortunately, one of the elementary teachers asked one of the boys to explain to the class what Stampede Ranch was all about. And the student, of course, was ashamed and bolted from the room. And she went out and again made another mistake of putting her arm around him. And he didn't speak to her very nicely and indicated that maybe she needed a new hole in her belly. The principal phoned Dad and said, Merv, thanks, but no thanks. So I stopped on the way home, and Father said, I need your help. And I said, yep, absolutely, anything. He said, how do I get an accredited school? I said, well, you need more than my help. That's a very difficult entity. He says, well, I really don't want to have this program without a school entity. I'll see what I can do. He'd grown up with a fellow in Cayley who had become an alderman in Edmonton. Father, in his way of doing things, phoned the alderman and said, hey, Alec, any chance you know the Minister of Education? And Alex said, yeah, absolutely. He's coming down to my place at Sylvan Lake for a barbecue. If you want to meet him, come up. His name is Dr. Lou Heineman. Come up and have a burger. Father went up for a burger on Sunday and came back with an accredited school on Monday. I tell that to educators and they say, no, that didn't happen. I say, yeah, that did happen. Again, I think a lot of our talk, Dawn, will hinge on relationships and the way the universe works us with regards to whether it be our private relationships, our relationships with employment. And in this situation, it was a simple matter of who you know, and Father had his accredited school. The Dr. Lou Heineman said, Mr. Edey, I want you to get creative. What we're doing isn't working. It's just that simple. You wouldn't hear that from a minister of anything these days. I will say with that, I would say we were blessed with a 25-year window of opportunity to whereby the energy that we brought to the program equated the energy of the government. The government was not in fear mode at that time. We were gifted with Ralph Klein as the premier at that time. I'll tell a quick story on Ralph. When he was with CFCN, he decided to do a little expose and a documentary on the program. So he drives up to the door and knocks on the door, and Dad answered it and says, sir, I'm Ralph Klein. I'm with CFCN. I'd like to do a documentary on the program this afternoon. Dad says, no, you're not going to do a documentary on the program this afternoon. And Ralph made the mistake of saying, well, what, do you got something to hide? And they were like two bulls in a china shop. And I thought, oh, this isn't going to end well. It did end well. They went into the big room, and both of them were absolute the king of BSers. They made each other feel good, ended up the best of friends forever. Ralph understood that Dad just said to him, we don't even know what's going on down there at the cookhouse right now. It could be all torn apart, or it could be looking like the absolute heaven. And I'm not going to have the program judged on any one moment. You come out and live with us for 3 days, and then you can do your documentary. And he did a wonderful. He came out with the voice of Benny the Bear. I forget his name. And they camped with the boys for 3 days. And from that day on, the program became Ralph's private program. Father always operated the program on a 1930s mentality. He grew up in the 1930s, so it was quite austerity. The good thing was it took 3 times taxpayers' dollars to have a boy in Woods Home or Hull than to have at the ranch. With that said, it was still a good business, and Father was a businessman, and as much as it was somewhat philanthropic with regards to time spent, it was a good business. So that initiated the first 3 boys. So Father came to me and he says, any chance you can come over here? Oh, the minister said, you've got 2 sons and they're both educators. I'll give you the choice to be administered by special education at Edmonton or to come under the wing of Foothills. And Father called me over and he says, you got any interest in coming over and creating a school program for me? And at that time, I didn't want to be in the school in a public or the Eden Valley situation. So I said, absolutely. And I said, I choose to join up with Foothills, and best decision I ever made. They were a wonderful partner for the 25, 30 years we were there. I went down and I couldn't have did anything more wrong for the first month. And I went up to Father. I basically was raised military. And when I said school time and the kids said, screw you, I reacted accordingly that no, it was school time. And after 30 days, I went to Father and I said, you got to get another cowboy. I can't sleep at night. I'm not making any relationships. I'm not liking myself. They're not liking me. And I gotta leave it up to you. I expected him to say, for Christ's sake, man up, which was his normal upbringing, but he surprised me and he said, what can I do? I said, well, what you can do is you can bugger off for a week or 2. And he said, well, why will that help? And I said, I know I need your approval too much, and I'm operating down here the way I know you want me to operate. I said, I learned over at Eden Valley that you can't push a rope educationally. My year at the principalship there, the Indian Affairs agent for the educational branch said, Mr. Edey, at the present time, our attendance is less than 42%. And you will be judged on whether you can bring that up. I built an outdoor rink, and the attendance went up to 78% the next year. So success was there. And it was very rewarding. Basically, there was lots of nights standing out there 30 below, pumping water from the Highwood. That, you know, long memories, but good memories. So I said to Father, I said, I do know what will work here, but you won't like it. And he said, well, test me. I said, okay. So I went down to the boys and I said, you win. I said, if you want to stay academically retarded, that's your choice. They immediately said, we're not expletive retarded. I said, I didn't say that. I said, academically retarded. I said, you're 16 years old and you can't read. If you want to stay that way, that's your choice. For the next future here, I'm here to keep you safe from each other, to keep Father's facility safe from you, and to basically be with you from 9 to 4. Beyond that, if you can see my door, then I can see you, and that's all we did. Well, they thought they had won the lottery. They immediately were up on top of the school sunbathing. I saw Father looking down over the hill, shaking his head, but he did leave. Predictably, it took about, remembering back, it took a little longer than a week, but the leader came in. He said, boy, does this ever suck? I said, what's that? He said, well, how did you grow up out here? There's nothing to do. I said, well, I've climbed every mountain back there, and Father, I always had young horses. I started young horses for him at a very young age. I rode every day, and I fished in the summer. I swam. Well, we can't do any of that. And I said, no, you can't, because basically I can't trust you to do as I ask. You've proven that, and you're quite happy not doing what I ask, as long as what I ask isn't too much. And he said, well, how can I get that trust? And I haven't. So basically it became a matter. I said, you give me half a day of school and I'll give you a half a day of fun. So away we went. The subjects I had were very objectively marked. Something as simple as I'd say to them, okay, I want 3 pages of copyright. And you just take any book and, well, that's baby work. And I'd say, it is, but you are learning how to do what you're asked, and that's not baby work. With the life you've had, that's major work. And either do it or you don't. I said, basically, it'll be that simple. If you do it, the allowance will show it, and the fun in the afternoon. So after 2 weeks of sailing along with that, Father said, I went to Father and I said, you know what? We're doing pretty good down there. You would ask me if we could have 3 more kids. I said, yeah, I can handle 3 more, because special ed was 6-to-1 ratio. So off he goes to Calgary to social services, and back he comes, within a week or two with 3 more kids. And I thought I'd just keep a sailing, but not so. The 3 kids basically came back with all kinds of stories of the cars they'd stole and what trouble they'd been. And pretty soon I had 0 kids on my side. So I went back to Father and I said, can I borrow your hard man? And he said, well, why is that? And I said, I need to use, at that time, Don, we had there were 2 little, I'll call them bunkhouses down that Guy Weedick had during the time when he had the Stampede Ranch. And there were 2 bunkhouses right by the barn, so it became barn school. I said, I need to separate the boys that will do what I ask from the ones that won't. And the ones that won't will just be babysat and supervised by Mike. He said, yeah, fine, that's good. So it didn't take me long to get all 6 back. He comes to me again and he says, I see you're handling the 6 pretty good. You're having pretty good days. Can you handle 6 more? And I said, well, not without another teacher. I said, you get me another teacher and we can handle 6 more. And at that time, I became aware that a fellow Natton friend, Mr. Dan Fox, was also tired of the public system. I think he was going to go into insurance, so I gave him a phone call, or Dad did, I'm not sure. And Dan was most willing to come up. The universe handed us probably the greatest gift educationally for the program. Dan was, and probably still is, but he's retired, the greatest educator I could ever hope to be around. He had one rule in his class, was you do what I ask, and that fit well with the students that would. I, of course, ended up with the ones that said, school time, screw you, you're with me, come with me. And my job was to get them feeling good enough about themselves that they weren't afraid to go to school. The biggest reason they weren't going to school was, of course, that they were ashamed of where they were at and didn't like to face the reality of being compared to the other kids. They didn't feel that they mattered at the level as the other. Danny was gifted with regards to the fact he was basically just a big kid at heart, and he geared up the whole school system with regards to him having fun. He had a hike to the high country every Thursday, no matter what, 30 below, the bus started. The dog got on and the kids got on, and they dressed to the nines. The staff would just go nuts because they knew that they were going to be dealing with all kinds of coats and crap coming back. But the stories that the boys now come back and pass with those Thursday hikes are magic with regards to how they felt about themselves. Danny quite quickly recognized that the regular education system wasn't going to work. He is and was a skidoo and ATV fanatic. He could keep running. So he asked Father if he could have 3 old skidoos. Father bought him 3 old skidoos, and that became the core. Danny developed a manual, safety-wise, maintenance-wise, that was as thick as probably any history book or whatever. And the boys had to study that, learn it, pass it before they could get on a machine. And very quickly, his school was filled with students eager to work. He then did the same with the hunter training. He would take them through the full hunter training course. And the gift at the end was I would load 2 or 3 of them up and take them out for 2 or 3 days with a pack horse, and we would supposedly go on a hunting trip. The reality was they made so much noise I didn't have to worry about shooting anything generally. I did have one occasion to whereby we were up on a back close to Mount Head on a seismic road, and I'm sitting there eating my sandwich, and I look up and oh no, here comes a spike elk walking right towards us, and the boys are just so excited. They said, shoot him, shoot him. I thought, we don't have any choice. We needed the meat. We could use the meat. So I shot him. We dressed him out, and we headed back to the ranch. I said, we'll come back to get him in the morning. That night it snowed a foot. And next morning they got up and they came and said, I guess we'll go next week if it Chinooks. I said, no, we're going today. So up we went. We could drive most of the way up to the base of Mount Head at that time, but we had about a mile walk in a foot of snow. There were 6 of them. And we dressed out the elk, quartered it up, and put it on the backpacks. And the boys, they came back. Probably 2 years later, Dawn, the kind of a heartfelt, the beautiful part of that story, I received a letter from a lady of one of the boys, and he had just passed away with a really bad asthma attack. And she said his last words on the bed table was, he said he'll never forget how good he felt about himself getting that elk out of that situation with a foot of snow. So that made me recognize that those experiences were valuable to them. Mm-hmm. So Danny and I operated that way basically for 25 years with regards to having boys learn to matter. The other one, we climbed Ruby's Hill, which if people go up and see the ranch as it is right now, you look to the east, and the hill on the left is Ruby's Hill. We bought the hill from brother and a sister, Ruby and Dick Measham. And early in the going, I said to Danny, we need a measurable phys ed that we can tell where the boys are at. So I said, let's put a bridge across the highway and we'll go up the top of Ruby's Hill every day. And it's a good climb, like it's a good hike. The top boys could do it easily because they felt good about themselves. The ones that were mad at the world would straggle along behind. And so we'd have one of us at the front, one at the back, and that's how we did phys ed. Danny documented all the altitudes that they climbed, and when they reached a certain altitude, every summer, Danny and I would take them and we'd climb Mount Head. We'd climb Mount Head with the boys numerous times. A few times when we shouldn't have been up there, we'd come back with stories, the hair standing straight up with the static, and real times to say, you should not have been up there. Well, we were up there. No, magical stories, and a gifting time with regards to, we were allowed at that time to hire people that we knew that had the same values and the same, quite often the same educational background we had. And we knew that they'd be fair for the kids. Possibly later on, I'll talk about why the ranch ended. And that was one of the reasons, was Hull, Home and Woods was in charge of the standards and policies, and it very quickly put in policies and standards that you could not operate a rural home under with regards to having staffing. The educational requirement basically made us pretty much have city children, and I don't want to be judgmental, but city kids see life different than rural kids with regards to a 10, 12-hour day, so staffing became an issue. In 2008, I had a little wake-up call. At that time, I should have probably known because I didn't have any fingernails and my teeth were ground down to my dentist said I looked like an 80-year-old. But an experience I share with you is my heart decided to give me a little wake-up call that I need to give it a little bit more attention. And I had a pretty significant heart attack, was jumper cabled back to life at Black Diamond by Dr. Doyle, and I feel very grateful to him. One of the nurses later on in years, I was back there and said, "Oh, that was so fun. That was our first time." I said, "Well, it was pretty fun for me too." At the hospital, after they put the stents in, got everything flowing again, they wheeled me down into the basement for the echocardiogram, and the technician took it, and this big sign is up behind, "Do not ask the technician, they won't tell you." I'm smart enough to not. I asked, I said, "Okay, what do you see?" And he said, "You got fairly significant damage. You probably got 26, 28% damage, or your heart is dead." I said, "Well, what's that mean?" He says, "Well, you got another good 5 years." And he pushed me out in the hall. And I feel I went through all stages of grieving with regards. I cried for probably, I felt I was there for 3 hours. I was probably there for a half hour. I don't know, but I was good. So what I did learn with the hospital system, if you're in trouble, you get looked after. But when you're out of trouble, then you're on your own. So when I got upstairs, he called himself the electrician, and I love my cardiologists up there. They were all very, very important people in my life. And he said, "Mr. Edey, what the hell? You look like you've been through a war." So I told him, and he said, "Oh," he says, "I'm sorry." He says, "That gentleman has more credentials than all of us, but there's a reason he's in the basement. But I'll be diplomatic and I'll say to you, if you don't listen to us, which probably 75% of our patients don't, he's right." He said, "I know your history. Your father had the same heart attack. How long did he last?" I said, 5 years. And he said, "That's what you were being told." But he says, "What I can tell you is if you will pay attention to what I'm asking you, that is just a number." And then he gave me a cryptic one. He said, "It's really quite simple. Your cholesterol's fine. Your fitness is fine. Your genetics suck because your grandfather and your father both died of heart. You aren't going to change that one." But he said, "The biggest thing is your personality." He says, "Your anxiety is showing in your teeth and your fingernails, and probably you're wired half the time. And I'm suspecting you got one of those asshole rancher tempers." I said, "Guilty." He said, "Well, that all adds up into the fact that it's really quite simple. You've got to learn to be better or you aren't going to be." And he left me with that. So that left me on the real journey with regards to spirituality. First of all, to understand what being's all about. It made me recognize that I had to find out why we're here, who we are, and why we're here, to my own satisfaction. Fawn and I think we counted once, it was some like 800 or 900 books on metaphysics, spirituality. We read all the major Bibles and religious books, looking for those magic keys. And just the side story, Jake, number one grandson, last week I was up in Fawn and said, "I want to show you something." Took me to the basement and pointed down, there's another 100 books. And they were all Jake's from the university. So the addiction went on. But anyway, what I ended up, and as I told you when we had a future meeting, is what I know is there in my findings, there's no truth. There basically isn't no known truths, and that includes the major Bibles. I do love the story of Jesus. I love his journey, and a very dynamic man. But I personally feel that the rewriters changed the course of Christianity. I took a good shot at Christianity. I did have the proverbial born again experience. I came home one day to Gail and I said, it was one of those 3 weeks or 30 below, and I said, "I've had enough of this crap." It was Christmas time. I said, go down to the credit union and borrow whatever it takes for us to drive south. We're going to take the kids to Disneyland. And I said, I want to drive until I can step out of the car and take my coat off. And that ended up about Cedar City because it's cold all the way down. Well, we did go. We did Disneyland. We did San Diego. We did Tijuana. Did the Grand Canyon way back. Just a wonderful trip. But during the course of the trip, we had one night we were out for supper. And as they were closing up, they were locking the door behind us. And Gail was paying the bill. And I was standing at one of those Goodwill reader things. And there was a book, Late Planet Earth by Lindsay. And I read through it, and we walked 3 blocks back to the motel. I climbed into bed, and I got back up, and Gail says, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go back and buy that book. And she says, well, they were locking the door behind us. And I said, I know. I'll just go back and buy it. And I walked back and walked right in. No person at the door, bought the book, came back and read it that night. And I didn't find out from it what I wanted to be, but I found out what I didn't want to be, because it basically is a vivid description of the ego and how it can affect your life. I knew that I had a pretty heavy ego because at an early age, I recognized that I really quite enjoyed being special. I can remember my father, probably at age 4, telling his company, watch this little bugger ride this tricycle, and I guess I could ride it well. And it's sort of revealing that I remember that as a important part of my youth. But what it did do, Dawn, I now know, it made me feel a little bit, it made me enjoy feeling special a little bit too much. And I spent most of my life, whether it be in sports or whatever I did, working hard to try to be special, or maybe even a little entitled. My mother, bless her soul, was literally an old soul, and she would say to me, you know, Ross, your left hand doesn't need to know what your right hand's doing. And I never understood that for years. But then I finally understood the fact is I camouflaged it pretty well, but I didn't camouflage it to her. She knew basically I was caught up in that. There's more on that with regards to that we'll talk further when I get done yapping here, telling my history. But I did learn to be better. I've tripled my good until date on the back of the milk carton. I've got 15 years under my belt, fully aiming for 20. Never felt better. The good part of the heart attack was the one cardiologist let me know unequivocally that it's a muscle that needs to be worked. So that allowed me to justify my escape to the gym. I'm in the gym 2 hours a day. Rain or shine, it's just part of my being. It allows me to feel good about myself, and it allows my heart to feel good. So other than that, I guess probably I'll shut up and let you ask some questions.
You know, thank you for sharing all that, because there's so much that you shared even in that amount. Like, that's what I mean. You have so much wisdom to share. And I know there's many people coming on here listening. So I'm like, which question do I choose, right? Because there's just so much back from your growing up to riding the bike to Christianity. So what I'm going to choose out of all of that is, you know, I know there's so many here. Okay, this one I'll go back to because I think what advice would you give your 20-year-old self? Because you've had so many experiences, you know, over the years. If you were 20 again, what advice would you say to Ross when he was 20?
You know, in all honesty, Dawn, knowing and with the premise I have of life now, I wouldn't say one thing, because I know that the life that's laid out for him is perfect for him. And inherent in that is kind of the roots of how I now live fearlessly rather than fearful. Wouldn't say a thing to him. And I probably, because of the fact, I guess I will say one of the roots of my, I'm going to say ability, because it is an ability to feel fearless, it didn't come from the books. It came from my oldest grandson. When he was 4 years old, he turned to Gail and he says, Grandma, you remember when I was a grandma, don't you? And Gail looked at me and says, oh, God, that's about 5 years. Yes, at least. To me, Dawn, it was my absolute authentic answer that we play this game many, many times.
Mhm.
And more importantly, we play it with those we love. And that's important for me with regards to how I judge life now, because it allows me to see that I got to be careful with this one because it scares a lot of people off from the woo-woo world. But I do feel my higher self. I do feel I have a higher self,
Mhm.
and it's having an amazing experience down here. Somewhat of an avatar experience, like a virtual experience. It feels very real to all of us. But in fact, I've had many and I'll have many more. That gives me the comfort that I really don't care about passing away, other than I'm really quite liking this game and I don't want to step
Mhm.
out of it any quicker than I have to. And where I differ from even my daughter Fawn somewhat is I don't see it as any mistake along the way. I think the screwed up lives we're living is absolutely purposeful. I think our higher selves sit up there and they say, okay, I'm going to go down this time and I'm going to be really rich and I'll see how that transfers. Or I'm going to be really poor. Or I might be sexually abused. Or I might have a person I love in my life that is dealing with enough empty, which I'll call empty, that they abuse me. The boys at the ranch were pretty well 100% abused, far too many of them sexually, most of them emotionally, and far too many of them physically. So we were dealing with very, very empty tanks. They were all running on empty with regards to how they felt about themselves and how they felt about life. They were afraid of who they were and they were afraid of life. So that was my indication. It was really quite ironic to me that all the years of learning at the ranch are the roots of how I now can live longer, because what I was doing with the boys, I had to do to myself. I had to find a way to accept life as it is. Uh, Probably one of my scariest moments, that was one of your questions, was when Fauna was diagnosed with a major lymphoma. And as a father, I instantly went into victimhood. I instantly uh, was seeing trying to accept the realities because it was not a good prognosis. The radiologist just came out with tears in her eyes, and Gail and Fauna both said, well, that's not good. And my first trip up to Fauna's hospital room, I'd probably cried straight for 12 hours and walked in the room, and Fauna just said, nope, Dad, turn around. I don't need that energy in here. You're
Mhm.
seeing me in the coffin. I see myself as an old lady. Until you can do that, I don't want you in here. Well, that was that we don't talk like that to each other. So that was a pretty stern statement. And I found a quiet place in the hospital and emptied myself of tears. And all of a sudden, I did allow myself to think, maybe she will beat this. Maybe she will see her children grow up. And Don, without a word of a lie, my heart went from absolutely closed. It just banged open with regards to the compassion, with regards to the beauty that would be, that scenario. So that was probably my first indication of me witnessing the opening of my heart with regards to the fact that of course, at that time, I didn't really realize that I was scared, and it closes. Uh, I'll go into my premise of life is uh, that our mechanics of that gives us this gift of disempowerment is really quite physical. Is when we resist life, when it scares us, we go into the fight flight mode, and our bodies fill with go drugs, and our heart chakra shuts down to allow us to defend ourselves. And there's a great story. I should have copied the author's name down. I didn't. The book is called, I think, The Eye of the Tiger. Lyman, I'm not sure. The story is, anyway, there's a gazelle at the watering hole, and along comes a lion, and gazelle and instantly goes into fight or flight mode and freezes, or freeze is another mode. With a gazelle, they generally freeze, and their body fills with the go drugs. The lion drinks and buggers off, and the gazelle shakes. The endorphins kick in, and he goes back to eating grass. The human in the same situation has the same reaction. Generally, the flight will come in, and they'll generally try to outrun the lion. But more importantly, once the lion leaves, we humans, because we have the freedom to judge life, we say, well, he's gone, but I know that sucker's around here somewhere. And we'll spend the whole day reigniting our fight and flight with the worry as to where he is. Now, that lion at the water trough could be, I don't matter. It can be, I'm not as liked by my friends. If a child's being bullied, he's going to have that lion at the water hole many times during this day. And that's why the victim in the bully situations, his heart chakra will be open and closed. Like I call it a teeter-totter effect. They go up and down as their mind writes the story and plays the game of life. So for me, it was a matter of, once I recognized that I am in fact looking at life as a game, and something like fauna situation, because it did return, which lymphoma is not supposed to. And at that time, I was gifted with the awareness that it's going to be what it's going to be. Was I scared? Yes. But did it put me into fight or flight? No. Because basically we had already weathered that storm. It probably came closer to put fauna in than it did the first time. She's alluded that to me. So now it's a matter that I know my empty self real well. I know when I get triggered, my empty self, I track back a part of it, and Sister Pam's going to love this one. But at this age 4, when I was feeling pretty special as to how fast I could ride my tricycle around the house, Father and Mother decided it was a good idea to bring a little girl into the house. And of course, there was 2 boys already, and that little girl became the apple of the eyes. Now, I knew that I mattered to Mom and Dad, but I also perceived that I wasn't mattering as much as I did before. And I think probably there's roots there with regards to, I can look now, I'm in a new relationship that I am very blessed with. And this relationship can trigger that same feeling with regards to having that little boy that doesn't feel he matters. And I work with my energy. If I'm in real trouble, I'll go out to fauna. But I do a half hour, an hour. I don't time it. I do Qigong and work with my energy system to keep my heart open and whatever. But when that persona hits, Dawn, I now know it well enough that it's very, very powerful. It's got a mind of its own. And because I study life, and because I'm working hard to be a good human, and I certainly want to be a good partner to the new lady in my life. But when that persona hits, and it's really, it'll be something that I'm perceiving in her life that triggers it, but it's nothing about her. It's just my perception that I maybe don't matter quite as much as what I need to matter. My way to get past it is to be very careful with it. I haven't touched wood, maybe touch wood. I've kind of put myself in a little bit of a laboratory, as I don't mind being triggered right now, even though it could cost me a very valuable relationship. My lady friend has met my empty. She's not really high on him because he's a bully, and it's definitely he's scared. He's perceiving that she's probably the problem, and the best way to fix it is to run, to get away. And the unfortunate part is it probably triggers her empty, and her empty being a little judgmental on my part. Probably she takes it internally. She's a little like fauna. She doesn't fight or flight, but basically she freezes, and then it can make her sick. And that's the last thing I'd want to do. So I'm working hard to understand that empty part of me. I take a look back through the ranch now. with different eyes with regards to the staff we were gifted to have. We had a multitude of staff that were on the, well, everybody's on the teeter-totter with regards to being empty at different times. But we were gifted in the early going with staff who would leave their empty on the other side of the cattle guard. They had the capability because the boys were important to them. But there periodically were ones that came in that we didn't know. And the beautiful part about it, the boys empty would trigger their empty in the heartbeat and either be up resigning within 3 hours or they just leave and you never see them again. So the boys themselves were our best vehicle with regards to having staff around that made them feel good about themselves. But I now spend most of my time just basically trying to understand the phenomena of the empty we deal with. I think all of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, know it's there. I don't think we know how dangerous it is, and I don't think we know how valuable it is to harness it somewhat. I don't personally feel we ever get past it. Fauna hates that one because she likes to transcend everything. But I have to speak from my own personal experience. It still pops up, and for a day or two, it's still out of my control. Other than I do have the control to stay at home and shut up, because if I allow it to speak, it's going to say things I don't want said. And if I allow it to act, it'll do things I don't want to say. And basically, from a healthy standpoint for all of us in relationships, I'm going to be a little personal with this one. I probably grew up with an admiration of my father beyond, I indicated I needed his approval a little bit too much. And I met his empty. I guess I was probably, Gail and I were together, so I'm thinking I was teaching in that, and so I'm thinking maybe 24, 25. And it knocked me for a loop because basically I didn't believe he had an empty. And it caused a toxicity in me because it made me angry. It made me vengeful. It made me challenged because I loved my mother. My best way to deal with it was to scratch him out of my life and just not have to be a part of it. I couldn't do that without hurting my mother. So I had to find my own way to go on in life. Thankfully, that was the time that basically I came to the cognition that we're all doing the best we can with what we have to work with. Once I recognized that Father's empty was rooted in his childhood download, the software that he was given in his first 4 or 5 years, again, I witnessed that phenomena of my heart flying open in compassion. I still didn't understand it. To this day, I do understand it with regards to the fact that when in the empty situation, we do things in life that are less than we want to be of ourselves. Infidelities, addictions, bullying, the whole rampant with regards. So I've got a deep respect and yet a deep admiration and a deep, I get a lot of enjoyment out of studying the effects of empty and how we deal with it. I feel that when we understand it and find our own way to come up with our own premise of life, I don't promote my premise of life. I don't want any of the viewers thinking, well, I guess probably I'm going to have to visualize that I'm an avatar down here having a virtual experience. But I will say this, the premise of life you were given from age 1 to 5 is not a healthy premise. It will be fear-based. And that's 100% right straight with all human beings. One of my favorite authors is David Hawkins, and he utilizes kinesiology with muscle testing to test truths in life. And he ascertains from a consciousness base, and basically for me, when we are connected with spirit and our heart is wide open and the chi and the energy of life is allowed to flow free through us, that's when we're the most conscious. That's when we're close to being connected to our higher self, to God, to spirit. And when it shuts down, it's when we go back to our animal stage. And his testing validates for him that 84% of society lives destructively. Destructively would be with the flow of energy being less than 50%. Uh, I judge my life, basically, I think I'm a 6 at most days. I'm pretty constructive. I slip down to 4.5 and I'm destructive. And I know when I'm destructive now, and that's valuable to me. I'm a better parent. I'm a better grandparent. I'm a better friend. I'm a better partner in relationships when I'm constructive and when I've got my energy flowing free. So my daily quest in life, I spend most of the day very, very aware that it's important for me to be as free flowing as I can possibly be. It I think passion comes into play there. I found out that the staff that we had at the ranch that had a deep passion in something outside the ranch, let's say it be in the rodeo world or be in the music world. I think back to a nightman we had that was a gifted bass player in a band. When he had lots of gigs, he would come to the ranch just full of himself. And there's another idiom with regards to the power. And he was magical with staff. If he wasn't getting some gigs and wasn't able to follow his passion, he would slip down into empty, and then the kids would come up and say, so-and-so is being an asshole. And I wrote one chapter on nobody's an asshole on purpose, and I believe it strongly. Is basically we all have our asshole moments, but we really don't have any understanding as to why they're there. Mm-hmm. And they're here for a purpose. Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure we're meant to find our way to empowerment. I don't totally buy into that. I'm not really sure that that's. I feel that if you find something in life that does empower you, then that was probably a part of the script that you wrote for yourself before you come down. Mm-hmm. I do believe we play a part in the scripts we write for ourselves. Maybe not right down to the nth degree, but I look back, especially at the ranch, with regards to the sexual abuse one, with regards to how often the boys that became perpetrators at the ranch. And yes, that did happen. Basically, when you would have 22 boys at the ranch operate on a free basis, our staff danced as fast as we can. We knew where every kid was and where they were. Our biggest enemy was the boys, the young boys that would come that had been majorly sexually abused in their houses, mm-hmm. would come to the ranch and want to be part of the big guys so bad that they, first of all, would give them their cigarettes. And in the early going, the boys smoked cigarettes. And because of the fact they had no connotation as to the seriousness of their sexuality, they would seek out situations that they could be with the big boys when they shouldn't be. And it became a daily challenge to have everybody protected on their own. We were gifted in the fact that the staff understood, and if there was ever an incident, it was documented. And at that time, we had a real trust relationship with social services. That we had many investigations. And quick story on that one: evidence of how empty can impact life. We had one situation whereby a new boy came. He was 15. And he had a girlfriend back in Calgary, so the ranch was the last place he wanted to be. He told his social worker that he'd beat her back to the city. One of the older boys indicated, well, if you want to get back to the city, just tell your social worker that one of the staff punched you. So he did. And lo and behold, we had two of the same name at that time. And when he did his incident report and whatever, the staff that he indicated it wasn't even at the ranch. So when the young social worker came out and I pointed that out, she said, well, we still have to go through the protocol. I said, yeah, I understand that. And she says, I'm not really sure that it didn't happen. I said, I don't know either, but it would look pretty clear with the other boy indicating that he was set up. It would look like not. Anyhow, I got a competitive bee in my bonnet that basically this was a BS one, and I went into the investigation meeting closed. I'm not sure what I was afraid of. I guess basically, in retrospect, I was probably afraid of the fact that the workers would believe the boys unequivocally, no matter what they said. And society pretty well is wired that way. Like when you read something in the press about a group home, instantly, most of us, self-included, will go, well, they must have really screwed up here. Not recognizing how crafty and how gifted these kids are with regards to manipulating we adults. So long story short, I indicated that I wasn't happy the way the proceedings, and it was questionable whether I'd take another boy from that particular worker. Well, the supervisor at that time then decided, well, we really don't need to deal with it. And so it basically cost us 3 beds. And in retrospect, I look back and feel bad about that with regards to stupidity. But again, I will claim back to what I said. I was doing the best I could with what I had to work with on that given day. Now, when I go into any kind of a situation, do I make sure that I'm running on full? Absolutely, because basically it is valuable and it's important. So that was a long answer to that one question, wasn't
it? It's good though, because you answered multiple questions inside that one question. So
I warned you when I talked that there's certain buttons when you push.
No, that's perfect. Perfect. No, I love it. Thank you. So much information in there. Okay, now we're going to move on to your bucket list because I want you to talk about that a little bit. What are 2 things that you have left on your bucket list?
You went to a bad one because, in all honesty, Dawn, I looked at that one. The way I live life, there's no bucket list.
I know.
My lady friend and I just came back from a absolute amazing river cruise. We went down to New Orleans because it's dear to my heart. We did Bourbon Street and did Frenchman Street, and then rode the river cruise up to Memphis and did Elvis, and then went up to Nashville when the CMTs were on, and it was amazing. That was on, the river cruise was on her bucket list, but I never had bucket list. I guess on a daily basis in the early going, I wanted to be a pro cowboy, so I became a pro cowboy. I wanted to learn to play the piano, so I learned to play the piano. So I guess probably if a bucket list is a desire, if it enters into my mind, I just do it.
Yeah.
And so.
Perfect. No, and I love that answer because that's how I live my life too. So it's like, just do it, right? Don't wait, do it now. Okay. So another question that I have is, what does spirituality mean to you?
Well, the easy answer is everything, with regards to the fact that it allows me to have a premise of life that, first of all, is allowing me to be alive. Because if I had stayed with my premise of life that it's scary, I wouldn't be here. It's just that simple. Because eating a daily, the amount of adrenaline I was feeding myself would be like eating fried chicken every day. It clogs arteries. So I'd say, the most important gift I was ever given was my heart attack, because it allowed me to take note of how I should look at life. And now that I can look at life as an amazing experience that I've chosen for myself, no matter how ugly it gets. I've got a grandson that's chosen to have the transgender trip, and it can be heartbreaking. But when I see his power of how he's dealing with it, I had lunch with him last week, and we talked with regards to the Bud Light cans, and I said, how does that impact? He says, it makes me feel sad. He said, it makes me feel sad that people have the viewpoint that a transgender person is something they hate seeing on a beer can. Should they not feel that way when they put a cowboy on Marlboro cigarettes or a cowboy on a beer can? And I said, well, at the present time, people are afraid of the transgender reality, and they're afraid that it's going to hit home. I said, the people that will be reacting on Facebook and wherever the most are the most afraid. They're resisting the reality that there are multiple different choices in life, and they don't want those choices. They want everybody to be the same, and they don't feel safe if everybody isn't the same. But from a grandparent standpoint, it's interesting to sit back and watch the journey. When I wished him his happy birthday, I indicated to my Facebook friends that it's one of the most valuable experiences I could ever hope for.
Mhm. Mhm.
That does bring to mind one thing I wanted to say, because we're on Facebook Live, Dawn, is when I lost Gail, it was right during COVID, and I learned very quickly that me being alone triggers my not mattering. Not all the time, but there's just every now and then I'll notice, holy shit, I'm here. It's just me here, and I trigger, and it scares the hell out of me. And I was in that full time, because not only did I not have Gail in the house, I wasn't able to go out, but I did have my Facebook friends. And at that time, basically, I could put whatever out there with regards to a philosophy of life. I put a song on. My kids all laughed like hell because I don't sing in front of people. I sing for 2 hours a day here to myself. And I said, it's very different, because before I put a song on Facebook, I probably sang it 50 bloody times to the point I'm sick and tired. But finally I'll get, well, that isn't bad, so I'll stick it on. And I was well aware that the people that would come on and say, Ross, hope you're doing good, whatever, it might be shallow to some people, but it helped me through a very difficult time. I could have easily, if I had stayed empty, I'm not really sure, because my empty is scary. My empty, I will freely admit, I share it with another granddaughter, and I share it with a son. Our empties could want to get out of Dodge real quick.
Mhm.
People have trouble understanding that, because they don't go there. They don't have the same empty. But generally, when you got a real powerful empty, you got a pretty powerful full too. So I choose to I choose to do my best to pull up to the tank whenever I can, and running on empty. The ironic part is there's major currency in it. Like when I'm in my empty, I feel like I could conquer the world. Basically, the adrenaline that I have, and I've said to Fawn, I said, why does it excite me so much to be such an asshole and to be so destructive to myself and my relationships? And she says, that's the gift of adrenaline. You're basically dealing with a real drug. So it's not just as easy as some people say, well, just don't do it. And don't do it. It doesn't work when it's fun. And and you don't even look at the consequences. Like when I'm in my empty, I can't speak for everybody, but when I'm in my empty, so a good counselor would say, well, do you not have the power to say, well, that's going to hurt that person? No, doesn't even come into play. So I guess if anything, I'm passing on to people to get to know they're empty,
Mhm.
respect it. I would say probably my empty now, objective-wise, I guess I do have a bucket list. Is I want my empty to be my best friend. I want to get to know him well enough that I can hear when he's crying out to me, and I can be there for him. I can have him feel that he matters. I think probably I'm the only one that can do that for him. And I guess that would be a bucket list, is to
Mhm.
become best friends.
Mhm. And that is so deep and so valuable, right? Because people don't even recognize when they are empty, right? They don't even have that awareness. So that's a really good bucket list
I'm
thing. Okay.
really, I'm really giggling about it, because I know your empty is going to come up in your new relationship with JB, and I'm going to sit back. Okay, now we'll see how tough she is.
I know, right?
It-
I know.
He,
The
he
new
matters to you, and that's all that matters. Yep. Get ready.
Yep, I'm
And
ready.
I'm only a message away when it hits.
I know. I'll be sending you a message asking you for some advice on that.
or,
Um,
or, or him.
right, or him too. Yes. Okay. Now I really love this question because you have 3 kids. Jamie's saying, "Ha ha, I heard that." Ross. Okay. So, do you see yourself in your kids?
Oh, absolutely. All the good points. No, Fred and I laugh about it, because when his asshole temper hits, it's almost humorous. Like he's basically to the level that I was. If I'm working on a car or whatever, the tools are going to be in the goddamn Caraganas. And my favorite one is a story is my nephew Rod Hennifer was working for us and living in the Stampede cabin right beside the house. Gail and I were scheduled to go to Mazatlan the next morning, I think at 9 o'clock in the morning. It was 35 below, and the phone rings, and it's Fred that the water had frozen up down at his place. And that was my place before it was his place, so I understood the water system. And generally, it's 2 days getting it back going. So I went out and jumped in the half ton. I noticed all the feed buckets were in it, and I knew the feed men were going to need them. So I just started chucking them. They were banging against the big room, banging against the Stampede. I didn't know Rod was in the cabin. He steps out and he said, "Uncle Ross, are you okay?" and yeah, so another one, we drive down, Fred's stuck, and he's kicking the crap out of the tire that's stuck. And the boy that was with me says, "Does that help?" And I said, it helps him. So yeah, we share that. And the beautiful part of life is that download that I gave to Fred, he's now given to one, if not two of his.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say maybe one of the gifts, Dawn, with regards to generational downloads is he can laugh at it a lot quicker than I was in our life. I don't laugh at it when he's in it, I can tell you that, because again, it's a triggered moment. Do I see myself in fauna? I think probably our mutual ability to care and have other people matter. We share that. Joel's an interesting one because Fauna does readings and whatever. I've had 2 readings, and both of them told me the same thing, that I was a really good giver and a shitty receiver. So I spent my life trying to figure out what the hell that meant. But Joel was indicated that he was a shaman in another life, and that's how he lives his life. He basically just goes along, and he was an absolute gift to Eden Valley. He worked up there as the addictions counselor, was his nomenclature, but his role became health coordinator, and for 10 years he was so valuable to them. But I'm kind of glad that he's not there. I should touch on the Eden Valley situation, Dawn, is different people would say, "Weren't you wonderful for going up there and helping those people?" And they had no understanding that when I drove across that bridge, those people helped me. The Eden Valley people, the journey they've chose, their soul side, their spirit side, and we all know the empty that's up there. Like basically the negativity on the reserve is horrendous, but the positivity on the reserve, I was gifted. I mentioned to you that there was 2 times where institutional mentality stepped in to be a negative to what I consider family up there. The first was when they took away the recreational part, where the people were being allowed to have an opportunity for something other than just drinking Lysol. The next one was after I was retired. The then counselor, who I hired when he was 18 to come over to the ranch and work, I'll tell that story in a little bit. He became a very, very close personal friend and probably one of the most integral care workers for 25 years at the ranch. But he had, I lost my train of thought. Isn't that odd? Yeah, he had, I knew that would happen sometime along the way. We'll leave that where it is.
Okay.
Where were we talking about now? It'll trigger me right back to it.
We were talking about, you were talking about Eden Valley and the gift that they gave you when you,
So he came to me and he says, "We're going to lose our e-learning school if we don't have an accredited teacher. Would you be interested in coming up for 2 or 3 months and allowing us to keep it?" And I said, "Well, absolutely. Basically, that's a no-brainer. We hadn't sold the ranch yet, so I had a place to live. I came back from Cranbrook. I put myself back on a 4-day on, 4-day off, because I had full flexibility hours. There were some of the adults that wanted to do their education in after hours, so I would stay open till 10 or 11 at night. And it ended up being a meeting place of safety First of all, I think partially because of my relationship with all the people, there's quite a divide in the reserve between the East and the West with regards, although now they're intermarried to the point it's not quite as critical as it used to be. And the vengefulness is quite strong. But the e-learning school became a place where they could come and be safe. The e-learning itself, like with regards to them doing I had 4 or 5 students doing grade 10 and 11 subjects quite successfully. But there'd be anywhere from a half a dozen to a dozen people per day come in, and I'd talk them how to Google different things. And one young individual basically got interested in his own roots with regards to studying back to the roots of the Stoney Nation, the fact that they're basically Sioux in their origins, come from North Dakota and South Dakota. And he would come and sit for 4 or 5 hours just studying his history. And it was, to me, so positive and so worthwhile. And the 3 months turned into 3 years. I loved every of it. I'd still be there probably if it hadn't been a typical institutional situation. The health center got closed down because of the building decay, and they just took the e-learning school and turned it into a health center, and just unequivocally. So I sit back and watch bureaucracies when they're pretty much operating from an empty stage. Like when I indicate that we were gifted with 25 years of our level of fullness meeting government's level fullness. Like when we had the relationship we had with Ralph Klein, the program supervisors at that time would come out to Danny. Danny had a yearly sports day. The program supervisors would come out and do the mud bath with the boys, run the relays. I've got oodles of pictures of very, very influential. The Minister of Education would come out and participate in the sports day. In the latter years, we would throw out the invite, and they'd send back and say, well, I have people for that, but they're tied up today and whatever. And the shift was basically that social services went, when Father was lobbying social services for 15 years trying to get the first 3 boys, it was very institutional. And I now, in my premise or how I see life, society impacts. There's a relationship between the bureaucracy and society. In society, when a boy or a girl ends up in some type of a disastrous situation in a group home, immediately there's an onslaught of attack on social services as these kids were your responsibility. And they don't understand that professional people are doing the best they can. We had that 25 years to whereby society was quite content to allow the government to have some private programs to pull the kids out of whole home and out of woods. It's pretty common knowledge that behavior control in woods and Hull is medication, is basically you medicate for the behavior. It would take us anywhere from 3 to 4 months working hand in hand with our doctor in High River to pull the boys off their meds so that they could experience real life. And it was a very vulnerable time, because when you're pulling anybody off the meds, and thankfully we had a professional, and a very caring professional, a very anal professional that worked hand in hand with us and the boys so that he would allow us to know the steps that the boys would go through. So we were allowed that blessing during that 25 years to allow 1,500 kids to find some way to feel good about themselves, and out of that 1,500, we've ended up with 3 that feel that they had abusive situations at the ranch. If you Google Stampede Ranch, there's a good chance one of them will pop up, because they, as they get older, they get very capable. The one felt that he was punched by a staff. Whether it was never documented or nothing, I would never, ever not believe the boy, just basically based on knowing the staff. The other was, unfortunately, a sexual abuse situation from an older boy. And it was a situation where the young fellow would not stay out of the older boys' cabins. And the other one was just mad because we wouldn't make him go to school. And that was kind of an ironic one because he was very, very powerful, empty, and there's no bloody way you could make him go to school. And so, we live with the reality that when you're dealing with other people's children, and especially in this climate, in this day and age with a litigious society, it's a vehicle. So I do urge people to Google Stampede Ranch because there's a video on there that is very, very special to us. 3 boys chose to come back and tell their stories. And Eppo Irks, I'm not sure if you met Eppo, who does movies, chose to do a little documentary with them and have some tissues because it's heartbreaking. I'll tell a little quick story on the power of relationships. One of the boys in that documentary states that, and this brought tears to my eyes every time I read it, but he said he caught himself in downtown Calgary walking by homes and seeing families and just wishing to the world that he could just have a family. So that was the roots of how he lived on the streets, I think, for 2 years before he came to the ranch. When he came to the ranch, he had one occasion after about 6 months he was going to run away, and one of the lady staff chased him down from the ranch buildings over to the road, which is probably maybe a quarter mile, and said, "No, you're not going to run away from the ranch." And he said, "I don't care." And she said, "I do care." And he said, it's the first time anybody had ever said that to him. So he came back, stayed at the ranch for 3 years, became a junior staff. And at that time, we had a program to whereby as a bonus for the boys that were at the top of the list with regards to behavior, work ethic, and whatever, we had a ticket system just the same as we live with in society with regards to the fact we ticketed good behavior and we ticketed bad behavior, and it affected their allowance both ways, plus or minus. So these 3 boys were the top of the list. They went in and stayed with this boy in his apartment to have pizza, and they had a swimming pool in the basement, and he was on the 4th floor. It's an awful story, so be ready for that. They swam, had pizza, and came up and went to bed. In the middle of the night, one of the boys came running in the rooms and said, so-and-so just jumped off the balcony. The boys had been diving over the railings around the pool the night before. And what the inspector for the health, the inspector, what do you call the person that comes and does the assessment of, I want to say the forensic auditor, but anyway, medical inspector, the chief medical inspector came and said, what I ascertain is that he was sleepwalking, saw the balcony, thought it was safe, and jumped off. And I went up and immediately picked up the staff, and we went and sat at the doorstep of the parents, the foster parents. They had been away on a holiday, so we sat there from 3 o'clock till 6 in the morning. 6 in the morning, they came in and they said, "What are you guys doing here?" And I said, "Well, we lost so-and-so." Said, "Oh, don't worry. We've lost them numerous." I said, no, sir. This is a bad situation. We lost him. Donnie instantly looked at the other boy, the staff, and said, "That's awful. How are you doing?" And to me, it was the greatest exhibition of power that I've ever seen with regards to the fact of a parent who had lost a child. And it was the only child we lost in the whole tenure of the ranch, and it wasn't on the ranch, but basically it was under 6 years. Long story short, too late, I know that. That family became that boy's family. Those girls in that family are now like sisters to him. The mother and dad are like father and mother to him. Story keeps going. The lady that ran and chased him down, her and husband worked at the ranch, and they unfortunately had a divorce situation. And just guess who they chose to be their mediator to settle a divorce. And it was the boy. So it's an opportunity for me just to sit back and say, wow, does life ever happen in magical time? So the other interesting part of that one is with regards to the universe looking after Stampede Ranch. We were well versed and well ready for the press to hit the front door. We didn't have any more answers than what the medical examiner could give us. Never heard a thing, not one thing. And I have no idea as to why it was not followed up on. I guess somebody basically just for one time had the common sense to just let it be what it was. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's powerful in many ways, many ways. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Ross. So the one question we've been an hour, but there's just a few more. The one that I think is important is, why did the Stampede Ranch end? Because you mentioned that before, that it was time.
I would say probably, I'll analogize it this way. At the present time, the lady that I have in my life, we mutualize empty and full. Like basically we're at an equate. I think for a healthy relationship, Gail and I played teeter-totter for 50 years. I knew her empty really well, and she knew my empty. We respected each other's empty. We were a little bit afraid of each other's empty, but we talked about it and we communicated. I would say that probably, and it's a chicken and egg question, I don't know whether we became afraid first or whether social services became afraid. I think we lived, the pendulum and swung back to whereby general society's relationship with social services was such is you got to start looking after these kids better. Well, better generally with an institution, with a bureaucracy, is we will medicate them and we'll put them in institutions rather than a free environment. It's a little like my dad often said, you can have a great dog, but if he never gets off the tether, he's not going to be a useful dog.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of is how we see it, is basically the bureaucracy put in place educational requirements for the staffing. And again, I don't want to judge the young people that came from the city, but we worked 4 days on, 4 days off, and it was a 12-hour day basically. And you weren't working that whole 12-hour. You're just being a parent for you as a mother. 12 hours. Give me 12 hours for the 4-day shift of just being a parent, and then 4 days off. I'll take it in a minute. And that's basically. And we were gifted with staff who had grown up that they would pace themselves. They knew a 12-hour day. The young people coming with a social services degree hadn't worked a day in their life, and basically and not only that, we weren't able to get as good a read on their empty. I'm smiling when I say this because Gail and Fauna finally asked me just to stay away from new staffing because I loved everybody and I thought everybody would be just absolutely great. Fauna could see empty quicker than any of us because she's a lot more of an empath. She's still got a big heart, so she wanted to give people a chance. And unfortunately, in the care field, there's the mistaken view when you know you're messed up that if you go help somebody else, that's going to help you. It's generally not the way it works. The part of you probably needs to be healed before you're going to heal the other person. And so I would say probably the biggest thing was that we grew apart, just the same as I'm one, I probably, I guess probably I said to you, I became a pretty good teacher. I became a great counselor. Basically, I was counseling kids and staff 24/24. I went through, I tried to add it up the other day, I think 8 or 9 divorces at the ranch, very close to both the husband and the wife. And I was at the eye of the hurricane with regards to having them try to be fair to each other and try to be fair to the relationship, but have the understanding that when it grows apart, it grows apart. To me, it comes down to I think people generally marry or get into relationships with mutuality in their level of mattering. And predictably, they'll either have a life of bliss to whereby that maintains its way. But if one or the other person slips with regards to having life impact them more than it was before, and they're empty more than they're full, the other person's going to get tired of it real quick. I've seen it during post-COVID. I've seen multiple friends who ended up so fearful during COVID that they weren't able to recover back to their level of feeling good about life and feeling good about themselves, that it affected their relationship. I've seen, I guess, 3 now that are close to home. So I'd say probably that what happened with the ranch is basically, and I won't put blame as I wouldn't in any relationship, is basically it's a matter of if you have mutuality of how you feel about yourself and how you feel about life, you're going to have a wonderful relationship. And if not, then best you move on. I noticed one of your questions in there, I think, was with regards to, I forget how it was, but the answer was going to be, you can always find somebody at the level you're at. There'll always be, if you're a 2 out of 10, there'll be another 2 out there. And you're going to have a lot of fun because there's going to be a whole bunch of empty in that relationship. But a lot of fun too. And I got a smile on my face because it doesn't worry me if I have any of my, I don't have a great grandkid yet, and I'm not going to get one until one of those doorknobs gets serious about life. But if in fact they end up in relationships with regards to being 2s or 3s, I'll just sit back and watch their journey because I know it's perfection at some level. 20 years ago would have caused me to be anxious all day long. So.
Perfect. Yeah, there's so much in what you're saying about all of that. And I love your view on life, right? About how we're all down here playing a game and everybody has their own lesson to learn and not to take anything personally. So we have 5 minutes left. What is one thing that you want to leave with everybody? What is a powerful message that you want to share with everybody?
I would say care about your weak self, care about your hurt self, because the more you get to know him or her, the better prepared you are to have it be a part of your life. It's going to be a part of your life, and it's going to impact your life in a huge way, whether eating too much, whether drinking too much, whether needing somebody else to matter in your life, causing infidelity, just a multitude of different ways. Probably one of the most impacting ways I see now is to, if I had the opportunity to talk to fellow teachers, I would say care about the empty persona to the point that you can leave him in the car when you go into the school. I now watch teachers struggle with certain students because those students trigger their empty. They've got similar empties, and then there's going to be a problem with the relationship between that teacher and the student. I see it in the sports world. I see coaches that are coming in. I'm going to be judgmental when I say very disempowered in life, hung up in the drug world or the alcohol world, but they're super competitive. So they've learned all the drills, and the parents with 14, 15-year-old boys think, oh boy, he's going to be a great coach. If that coach doesn't have his number one goal, having those kids feel good about themselves, it's going to be a destructive relationship. And I see it over and over and over in our minor sports. Probably my best example, personal example with regards to the impact of power management in sports is I took on the senior team in High River with the awareness that I was using it as a laboratory to test out my viewpoint on mattering. The senior team in High River, which I was a part of, I think I was a flyer for 4 or 5 years, but I played against them probably 10. Historically, they're always laden with major talent, but they really struggled being a competitive team because they never ever were able to have the power structure accepted amongst the players. Everybody was on their own agenda. When I took them over, I used the analogy. I said, they're all good friends of Jason Glass, who we all know in High River. And I said, in our situation here, we're like Jason's 4 horses. If they're all pulling hard in the same direction, he might win the race. If one of them is on their own individual little journey, he doesn't win nothing. I said, we're going to be the same. I had a little bit of an ace in the hole. I had one player who wasn't quite gifted with talent enough to be a part of the team, but he wanted to be part of the team. And he's major full. Like I don't think I ever met his empty. So he became a gift to me. I said, hey, buddy, I want you to go to the bar after the game, and I need to know who's happy. I need to know who's happy playing with who. I need to know how the guys feel about themselves. So I was getting a little bit of a spy report on a regular basis. We went undefeated through the whole season and through the whole league playoffs. We went undefeated the first year, the whole year, which had never happened. They said to me, they said, okay, we love that. That was different ones said that's the best hockey year we've had. And it was a magical year. They said, let's go provincials the next year. I said, okay, but if we're going to go provincials, we're allowed 3 imports. We need 3. So we brought 3 players in. One of those players was a very gifted, empty, talented human being. Very early on, I recognized he was toxic to the team. He didn't have the ability to get off his own agenda for the sake of the team. I called a team meeting to address it and had 3 members out of the 15 show up to come to the meeting. I just handed the keys over and I said, I don't have the power to handle this. So now I sit back and watch sports teams. I watch the Flames. The Flames this year had a disaster year. They had 2 cancers on the team. They had 2 individuals that the coach was not able to have mutualize on an energetic basis with the team. But when you do have it happen, Dawn, it's absolute magic. So yeah, answer is know you're empty. Maybe learn to love him or her. I'm close. Basically. I'm going to be mad as hell at him if he chases this lady out of my life or runs away, or either one. But am I scared of him? I'm aware of him. Am I fearless? Not yet, Dawn. Not quite. Yeah, closer, but
Well, I'm glad to hear you're close to fearless. I think that's kind of the goal here on earth, is that we're all getting. And I want to thank you again for spending this time, with all of us and sharing all of your stories and your wisdom and your honesty. You're very honest, you're very authentic. And I just think there's so many riches that you have shared in our time together here on the Wisdom Weaver. And I truly hope that we're going to see your book one day come out.
Well, it's a win-win, Dawn, because when you first contacted me, I knew that I knew I would participate, just basically because of yours and Fauna's connection. I would have been shot if I didn't. But in the last 3 or 4 days, I've did more writing than I had. This courting is time consuming. It was definitely getting in the way of my writing, and and I've answered that. Different people have said, "Well, am I ever going to get to read this book?" And I said, "That is not why I write. I don't write to pass on. If the universe gives me a message that I'm meant to have it put out there some way, it's already written, Dawn, basically. And I'd say if there's one thing that will catalyze me sort of getting past it, I'll analogize it to my songwriting. Is I'll spend a week or 2 or 3 writing a song and get to where I really like it and whatever, but then I get somewhat tired of it and I get ready for new material I want to. So I'll stick it on Facebook or not, one of the two, and then it's done. And then other than the fact I'll go back and replay it, I play all my songs every day just to keep them fresh. I do have God damn, you found me with another bucket list that I didn't recognize. I've got 1,500 kids that I could access, but I got 100 of them in close proximity. And I have a desire to sit down and visit with them for 2 or 3 hours over a coffee, possibly do like you have done and take a list of questions. I don't want to hear how wonderful the ranch was. That always comes up. I want to know how they retained their power when they left the ranch, and if it slid away, how they got it back, because that will allow me to be a little bit of an addendum to what I learned from the boys at the ranch. I guess probably what I'd say is I want to learn more from them. Everything I know in life came from supposed troubled kids, but basically the beautiful part about troubled kids is they're powerful kids. And I should mention that it wasn't all boys. We did venture into the girls area, and different people said, "Oh God, it's just going to be horrendous with regards to the boys wanting to be with the girls." And of course, that is your thought. That was never a problem. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
it enhanced our sexual situation because the boys, the last thing they wanted any of the girls to know was that maybe they were being inappropriate. So in a way it helped. Where it fell apart was little girls at 16, 17 are way more empowered than little boys at 16 and 17. And we absolutely could not find staff that could deal with them. They were crafty. Basically, if you're in a restraint situation, you knew damn well they're going to be screaming rape and tear their shirt or whatever, just basically to get what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a short-lived program, but it was a very valuable program. Sister Pam took it to a new level. I think probably she's got 20 or 30 fledgling parts of her family that she never quits. When it comes to being full and not having to, I'm being a little bit, I guess I'm trying to be fair because I was not a good big brother. Basically, once I recognized, I think at age 4, that she was buggering up my specialness, I was not a real good. I'd cut all the hair off her dolls, and basically I was fairly miserable. So, and I had the best big brother you could ever have. I had the best mentor of lesson. Now Pam is probably my best friend ever. I trust her to the world, and the work she did with ranch kids post ranch, if people don't know, is absolutely magical. And it's not it's doing, because it never ends. She's got 6 or 7 young girls with 5 or 6 kids of their own. She's grandma to all of them. And I just sit back in amazement because she is the epitome of power. And yes, she won't be on.
Yeah.
So.
No, I haven't seen her, but there's been many others here.
I think she blocked me.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. All right. Well, we're at the end of the hour. Well, a little more than an hour here. So I just truly want to thank you, Ross, for spending the time here and for sharing all that you have. And maybe one day I will be able to have you on here again so you can share more wisdom with us. So thank you very much, Ross.
Thank you, Dawn. Anytime. Basically it's I think we share a purpose in life, and when you find that, and it's not common. There's not that many of us wackos out there. So
that's right.
Sorry.
No, it's whatever word you want to use. Woo woo, wacko.
As my
we're all out there.
Grandson says, sorry, not sorry.
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly.
No, I do feel that probably we're at a tipping point in society with regards to people understanding that there's a way more going on than we all understand. And a huge part of that is getting to know our real selves. And our real selves has that empty part that plays a huge part in our quality of life. I guess probably I'll end on that message is I feel strongly that the opinion we have of ourselves and the opinion we have of life. That's why I one of the names I would put on my book if I do it was The Power of Premise, because a premise is an opinion given as a truth and then acted upon as such. And the reality is that if you practice a premise long enough, it can become a belief. I will say in passing, I don't want some of my very close Christian friends thinking I'm throwing rocks at them. I do have Christian friends who have practiced their premise into belief to the point that they do live fearless. So it really don't matter what opinion you choose. Have it be a good opinion, have it be a safe opinion, and practice the hell out of it. And I watch you do it on a daily basis. So, and and that's coming from somebody. I hope I can say this. I know you're empty real well, and the transcendence you've had in the last 10, 15 years is huge, and mostly because you care about yourself. When it comes to energy healing, Fawn and I laugh about the one aspect of energy healing is when I know I'm really in trouble and phone her, we both know that the minute I get off the phone, I'm done because I've let the universe that I care. And that is how strong the universe plays in our life. Okay, I'll shut up.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's a really strong finish. So thank you, Ross, and thank you to everybody who's been listening. The recording will be here for everybody down the road. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.